หะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ พุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมาสามิ One way of dividing up defilements is into twofold division, craving and views. And the Buddha said that the defilement of craving is that one which is most prominent amongst householders, and defilement of view is that which is most prominent among monastics. And I think this can certainly be seen very clearly when we come into the realm of meditation practice, and all the various opinions, views, ideas, theories concerning meditation. And that's just in the Theravada school, let alone comparing with other traditions, Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions. And there is a deal of controversy concerning exactly the path of meditation or the path to enlightenment. And in Thailand you have various traditions. You have the forest tradition, of which we are a part, in which for the most part the way of jhana and the way of development of samatha is stressed as a prerequisite for development of vipassana. And you have Abhidhamma influenced samnaks, and you have the Burmese teachers and teachings, and in those teachings then there's emphasis only on vipassana, and samatha is considered not so important or not important at all. And there's a lot of disagreement just about how much you have to concentrate your mind before you can develop vipassana. The people who are devotees of the pure vipassana school speak sometimes can be quite denigrating about samatha practice, and talk about getting attached to peaceful states and not being truly Buddhist. And then the samatha people can start being quite negative about the vipassana, and there's this put down of the vipassana people that it's vipassanuk, nuk meaning to think, and it's not really clear vision, but it's just thinking about the three characteristics that the mind which has not been fortified by jhana is not capable of developing vipassana. And it's merely sanya, it's not really wisdom. Now there are this debate has been going on for a long time, and I could probably spend a few hours talking about the various views and opinions of all the people who have contributed to this debate. But I just want to point out one or two things concerning this question, and in fact the nature of meditation practice. And start off with that. Let's come down a few rungs from the heady heights of jhana and vipassana for a moment and talk about the hindrances. And the first four hindrances are very easy to see. Perhaps at the time when you're feeling a lot of sensual desire, then you don't have much insight or perspective on that. But once that's passed away, it's very clear to you. Ill will, aversion, even more so. Sloth and torpor, when you've recovered from that, come round from it, you're usually quite aware of it as a problem, something to be done about, and agitation, of course, a very coarse, relatively coarse defilement. But doubt is a kind of an abiding hindrance, and it's often not even considered to be a hindrance. And you can see quite often meditators who've got a lot of skill in meditation, in the ability to let go of sensual desire and ill will, and to take the mind beyond sloth and torpor and agitation, but then get caught in doubt in particular questions and doubts which they just can't put down. And when we're in the realm of mental development and coming to a tradition which has been around for over 2,500 years, and innumerable meditators and innumerable experiences, and many teachers and traditions, the first thing to acknowledge, perhaps a little ruefully, is that there is always room for doubt until you become sotapanna. Sotapanna, then you're blissfully free of doubt. But in terms of finding your way to that state, there's always opportunity to doubt. And I think it's very important for us to notice how desperately we want something sure and fixed and clear-cut, something that we can hold to, some kind of firm principle, some kind of step-by-step progression. We want everything worked out. Now that's not necessarily wrong. There's something very intelligent about that, isn't there? Well, obviously, if you're just wandering around in the dark, it's quite likely you're going to walk around in circles. And you can come to a lot of wrong conclusions, like the story of Winnie the Pooh, when they come to that little clump of trees and they see a set of footprints, and they think it's the heffalump, and follow the footprints right around the forest, and they come back, and then they see that there's two sets of he sees there's two sets of footprints. He thinks there must be another heffalump come and join the first one, and so now he's going to find two heffalumps, and he walks all the way around the forest. He sees now there are three of them, and starts doubting about the whole thing. When you're in the dark and when you're not, you don't know what you're doing and what footprints are, then obviously you can make a lot of mistakes. But there is also something a little bit neurotic that creeps into this, and a disregard for the mystery of the human mind and the irrational or the aspects of spiritual life which cannot be planned for. It's not. You're not working with a clean sheet. There is all kinds of stuff coming from past lives which is affecting your. Even if you can't remember your past lives, there are certain experiences and things you're having to deal with which are certainly affected by the conditioned by the past. Is the raw materials you've got to work with. And to put that very simply, everyone's mind is different. It has certain characteristics which we all share. Nature of the 5 hindrances is the same, and the state beyond the 5 hindrances. But inclinations, skills, and qualities of particular abilities of the mind can vary a lot. And what tends to happen, at least as I can see, is that a particular monk or teacher follows a particular path of practice and realizes the truth, enlightenment as a result. Then inevitably and necessarily he will teach from his practice, and he will teach most confidently when he's talking about things that he's seen and experienced by himself, as he knows for a fact that if you do this and this and this, he knows that he did this, this and this, and then he got this result. So he knows that those particular practices lead to those particular results. And so he'll teach that to his disciples. But then there's a doubt arises. Well, how can we be sure that those particular practices or that particular path that he followed was in fact the cause for the result which he experienced? Perhaps there were other factors involved. Perhaps they were merely the occasion for his enlightenment rather than the cause of it. How much was actually in the particular way he went about the practice, and how much of it was just this ripeness of parami that he'd accumulated over a long time? This is where doubt can arise. How do you deal with that kind of doubt? So you have a teacher who's followed the what we call the royal path, if you like. This is the certainly the way the Buddha set down is the best or the highest way of practice, if you like, which is to it's going beyond the 5 hindrances, developing the jhanas and using jhanas as a basis for vipassana. And a teacher has followed this royal path and realized the truth, and then he teaches that. And then someone says, well, how important is jhana? How essential is jhana to realization? And he says, absolutely essential. You cannot do without jhana. If without jhana, then it's not possible. Because he's speaking from his experience. Before he realized jhana, insight didn't arise. After he realized jhana, it did. Certainly true for him. But can we, and here's the doubt, can we take from that a general principle for all meditators that they will have to follow that same way? And we know there are great masters and great teachers in other traditions who would say, not necessary. Some teachers followed the way of pure vipassana and refuted the way of jhana. He says he's realized the truth as well. Is somebody right and somebody wrong? Are they both right? Are they both wrong? Is everyone deluded? Maybe everyone's deluded. You could start doubting about that. There is scriptural evidence that there will only be realization of Magga Phala Nibbana in the first 500 years after the Buddha's enlightenment, after that steady degeneration. This is a view held by many bhikkhus in scholarly circles, that these days there's no question of realization of Nibbana. Those monks who feel they have realized it are deluding themselves. It's vipassanupakilesa, or they're deluded by jhana, by the peace of jhana. This is a possible doubt. You can't, if you haven't yet realized enlightenment, you can't really say, can you, that it's possible. In all honesty and fairness, you say you can believe it is, you have the faith it is, but you can doubt about it. So the question of samatha and vipassana comes up, and notice the tendency for people to get dogmatic about it, and people get dogmatic because of true results that they see, and this is the origin of it anyway. But this isn't, of course, just a scholarly dispute or a scholarly squabble, is it? Because it has a direct bearing on our lives as bhikkhus, as monastics, as meditators. Centrally important, isn't it? So, fuel for the debate. The monks or the teachers who talk about the central importance of jhana can point to many suttas to back their claim. The Buddha says, monks, I can see, I talk of enlightenment as being based on the first jhana, or as being based on the second jhana, or as being based on the third jhana, or as being based on the fourth jhana, or as it being based on one of the arupa jhanas. And over and over again he's talking about samma samadhi in terms of jhana. But then a doubter might say, well, what about all those people who realized fruits of the became sotapannas and even arahants while listening to a desana of the Buddha, even after apparently never having meditated before. And this happens many times in the suttas. Did they enter jhana before that insight arose? Doesn't seem very likely, does it? Seems that their mind was in a very calm, receptive state, but hard to see how they could have entered jhana before that knowledge and that letting go took place. So this is a kind of debate that goes on. From my reading of the suttas and the scriptures, I would say that there is recognition of the diversity of the human mind and of the aptitudes and abilities of different human beings, and there is a teaching of the different paths of practice of samatha, leading vipassana, coming before vipassana, and also of vipassana coming before samatha. How vipassana comes before samatha is explained as someone sits and develops the perception of impermanence, or perception of dukkha, or perception of anatta, and through diligence in this practice, then there is like an arum in Thai, a sense of letting go, the the sense of letting go becomes prominent in the mind, and that becomes the samatha object based on vipassana, putting down with wisdom whatever arises as aniccaṃ, dukkhaṃ, anattā, and then this power of letting go becomes the object for samatha, based on, dependent on the vipassana. So here, please notice vipassana here is used in two terms and in two ways. Most ideally, it's this clear seeing, which results in the abandonment of defilements. But it's also used in a more looser term to be that practice which leads to that vipassana. So here using power of thought and power of reflection to reflect on the three characteristics can lead the mind to samatha. So it's vipassana leading to samatha. Now, it is therefore up to each individual meditator to decide on a path for oneself. If one wants to follow the royal path, as they called it, of samatha and development of jhana as a basis for vipassana, that's fine. That's wonderful. It's the highest path. But if one doesn't feel an aptitude for that, or finds one just doesn't feel that an inclination for that or an aptitude for that, or one has a real interest and this sense of chanda for investigation of the five khandhas, or the sense bases, or investigation of in terms of the four elements, in terms of the three characteristics, then that's fine also. That's not considered a wrong practice. What happens when either path is followed is unpredictable. This is the next point I want to make. Someone perhaps would be developing the samatha practice, and then something within the mind inclines spontaneously towards investigation of the three characteristics, without a conscious decision beforehand. It just seems the mind wants to go that way. Somebody else may decide, well, I want to investigate the three characteristics, develop vipassana, and there'll come a point where the mind just it's as if it's tired, or it's had enough, or it just puts it down and inclines towards peace. And it's not like at every step of the way you have this kind of conscious control that you're going to follow this particular way. You're in a realm where there are these kinds of mysterious forces there. However you want to talk about that kind of mysterious force as being power of barami or vipaka or whatever. But it doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. I think a good standard to take is that when the mind becomes calm, just to say whether the mind is not being disturbed by the five hindrances, say where the mind is happy with, content with the object, and is automatically applying itself to the object. There's not this sense of effort or keep having to bring the mind back. There's this kind of flow of attention on the object. Then you can start to develop this contemplation of the five khandhas, or of the six sense bases, or of the presently arising phenomena in terms of impermanence. Now, how peaceful do you have to be? This is the question. The standard which is given by Ajahn Tate for one is that if you start to try to do this vipassana practice and the mind starts to wander, unlike the samatha practice where you persevere, it starts to wander and you bring it back, it starts to wander and you bring it back. He says if that takes place, then it means that the mind isn't strong enough to pursue that path. Go back to the samatha object until the mind has enough strength and stability to do that. So this is one answer to this question: how much peace do you need? So if you're developing samatha first, then you may reach a point where you can try to develop vipassana. If the mind's wandering around, or it can't just merely note the arising and passing away, it's adding things on, or it's other thoughts arising, that means that the mind's not up to it yet, and leave it. This is one standard. Here the point to make, I think, is that you learn by experience. You try things out, and you make mistakes sometimes, but you begin to know for yourself, how peaceful your mind has to be. What if you apply your mind in this way, what the effects are. If you apply your mind that way, what the effects are. And you can find this spontaneous going backwards and forwards between these two modes of attention. So Ajahn Chah would talk about this. He's talking about the mind going into appana samadhi, although he didn't often use this term, and then the mind withdrawing. He says the mind withdraws, and then you develop the vipassana. You develop the vipassana for a while, and then the mind spontaneously returns into that peaceful state for a certain while, and then after a while it withdraws, and then you did the vipassana. So there's this movement between the vipassana and the samatha, which is taking place without really any conscious effort. So he says it's not really that the mind's withdrawing, but it changes. There's a resumption of the more subtle kinds of mental activity. There's vitakka and vichara. So this is the way that Ajahn Chah would talk about it when he's talking with people who were developing jhana. But with other people, and say with Western monks, he would say, don't worry so much about that. If the mind reaches upajjhara stage, it's not yet in jhana, but the mind's free of the five hindrances, then start to develop the vipassana practice from there. So he would tailor what he was saying to who he was speaking to. There wasn't any one fixed teaching. So learning for yourself, developing skillful means for yourself. They don't necessarily have to be the ones in books, and they may not perhaps be so useful for other people. I myself have developed a lot of anatta skillful means. One I like to bring up the word I and note the relationship between the sense of I and particular sensations, muscular sensations in my face, because I found that a sense of self tends to reside in the face, in particular parts of the face and the teeth and this kind of way of looking at relationship between mind and matter in the face and the head. I don't know whether that be so useful for anybody else, or whether anybody else would be so interested in doing that. And I want to make that sort of the official practice of what Varnanachat while I'm the teacher here. What our tradition is doing is saying, looking at the underlying principles involved, and saying within that, use a particular samatha practices which you feel an aptitude for, you feel chanda with, you like to do, you're committed to doing them, whether it's anapanasati or metta bhavana or asubha kamatan or maranasati. There's not one fixed technique here, but we're talking about what samatha is, what vipassana is, and what are the things that prevent you from pursuing those paths, developing those techniques. And these are some of the things I've been talking about in the previous talks. The underlying ditthi, whether there is that sense of renunciation, whether one really wants to. Because often, not in every case, but often, we can give too much importance to particular techniques and information, when in fact it's not so much that we lack information, it's just that we lack the ability to apply the information that we have. We forget. There's a lack of mindfulness there. At the time, what is it that prevents us from applying the information that we have already? What is it that makes us forget? That we know what defilements are, and we know what nivaranas are, but why do we still fall for them? What are the underlying attitudes which perpetuate these things in our mind and prevent us from being free from them? These are some of the things I've been talking about previously. What always sort of stunned me at Wat Pah Pong and in the Thai monasteries was just how little sort of technical information that bhikkhus were given to work with. They sit up straight. Watch your breath at the tip of your nose, and your in-breath, Bud on the out-breath, toe, and that was about it for many monks. But this is the faith and application. They were very successful at it, and then there would be talks and giving energy and certain reflections. But that's something that's always influenced me, that in fact you don't need to know so much, and it's important that you're willing to just apply this very simple technique, and then you meet problems and difficulties, and then finding ways of dealing with those skillful means of approaching things. And so, as I say, everybody's mind is different. Some people have very ability to reflect on things and to use a wisdom faculty, and ability to concentrate the mind on the point is quite limited. Now, if you really insist that somebody concentrates the mind on a point and doesn't try to reflect on things, it can be very frustrating for them, for one thing, and it's not making the best use of their abilities. Somebody else may have a really strong ability to concentrate the mind, and then that's to follow that. The power of mind that person has should be supported, and he should make the most of that. But I don't think that there's one particular way that we can point to and saying, yeah, we have to go that way. You have to develop jhana, or even to say jhana is not necessary. Don't worry about jhana. You don't need jhana. Just make the mind quite peaceful and reflect. I don't think that we have to speak in that way. And say, make a choice. If you want to follow the path of jhana, fine. You follow the path of jhana. You just keep the mind quite completely dedicated on your object. Whatever posture you're in, you don't let your mind become separated from the object. Don't talk a lot. Don't socialize. Keep yourself withdrawn and aloof, and don't let that object out of your mind day and night. And that's the kind of dedication you need to be developing a jhana. And then traditional ways, develop the first jhana, and then you develop fluency in the first jhana, knowing how to enter it, how to leave it at will, how to maintain yourself in it at will. When you're firmly established in the first jhana, then you set about reflecting on the faults of the first jhana, that it's still close to nivarana, it's still relatively unstable. You start to reflect on the way that you see vitakka and vichara as coarse, until the mind wants to put vitakka and vichara behind it and go on to second jhana. There's this sense of purification, going from the coarse to the subtle, right from dealing with the 5 hindrances, upachara, right up to fourth jhana. This is the traditional way of talking about it. But then there's room for doubt. Why is it that the meditation masters in our tradition don't talk about this? They talk about upachara and appana, as if they don't talk about going this step by step. You have a room for doubt. How important is it to go step by step? Well, you can make a decision, but which way you want to go. Perhaps it won't be as you think it will be. Perhaps it's just like you get to a point, it's like you're going down in a lift. You just and then there's this sort of bright light and complete separation from all sense activity, no thinking. Perhaps you'd intended to develop first jhana very firmly first, just like it says in the suttas, just like the wise goat or the animal on the rocky mountain path. It's sure of its standing before it puts a foot out to the next rock, and then it stabilizes itself before going to the next. That's the way of a clever mountain goat. That's the way the Buddha says you develop jhana to jhana, but quite a lot of monks don't do it that way. So you have to have that kind of flexibility of mind. And I said, well, that sort of thing, what do I do next? And that's a very common question. You develop meditation, you're quite calm. You say, what do you do next? Well, you can choose. You can choose to follow the path of vipassana and consciously investigate the sense bases of the 5 khandhas according to 3 characteristics, or you can go the way of samatha. And the way of samatha there, samatha leading to vipassana, Ajahn Chah would answer this question very succinctly, I think. He said, intensify the mindfulness. So what do you do next? You're quite calm, peaceful, you feel you reach this sort of plateau. What do you do next? And his words were, intensify the mindfulness. Make the mindfulness and the sampajanya, the clear comprehension, clearer, sharper, stronger. That's the way ahead, following that path. So this is just a few comments on this whole debate and the way of practice. Say, notice most vital thing I feel is to really understand the whole structure and nature of doubt, skeptical doubt. And there are two kinds of doubt. The Buddha says to the Kalamas, very good householders, you're doubting in that which should be doubted. You see, they're all doubting about all these various teachers coming. Everyone says they know the truth, they're right, and everyone else is wrong. And what sort of they don't know what sort of criteria to use to decide, and so they're doubting. And the Buddha praises that kind of doubt. You know, you're faced with something which you don't have the criteria, you don't have the information to make a decision, so you have to search for that information with a sense of wise doubt. But there's another kind of doubt coming about where you don't want to commit yourself because you want the very best, or you want to be absolutely sure before you do it that it's going to work out the way that you hope it will. You don't want to commit yourself just for the on the off chance that in fact it's the other way, it would be better. Well, you have to commit yourself. You make a wise decision, and you take responsibility for it. You can't know beforehand that you're right. Maybe you can make a particular choice and say, well, Ajahn Chah says this, or Ajahn Mahabua says this, I'm going to do this, and then somebody says, well, yeah, what about so and so, and what about in the suttas it says this and that, you see. You just have to go forward and follow your path. But when you start to notice what it's like when you have that skeptical doubt, what skeptical doubt is like when it's present, how it affects your mind, it's a subtle defilement. You need quite a sharp power of observation to pick that up, because we tend to identify with doubt very easily. So try things out. Try things out. Do they work? Do they work for you? Not whether they work for anybody else. Be creative. You have the basic principles of samatha means keeping the mind on an object. Vipassana means seeing the three characteristics. You have the basic principles involved. Then there's how you actually go about that, and the techniques you use. Is really something that you can work with yourself. Okay, so I'd like to leave the evening talk at this point.